Come to our meeting. I'm out enjoying uh, maybe one of our last beautiful summerish days. Hope you are as well. And I'm not going to say too much up front. I'm just going to focus on a couple of items of legislative business that are right before us today, and the most important of which is the our ongoing effort to try to get a COVID-19 bill through before the election so that we can get a little bit more help to the American people at a time when the pandemic is unfortunately spiking again. In a way, I wish we could have scheduled this for tomorrow because today is kind of our self-imposed deadline for trying to resolve this and get an agreement at least between us in the House and President Trump. And so, we'll know more by tomorrow, but I'll tell you the basic lay of the land. And that is that we have been holding out for a good enough deal, one that provides a level of assistance that we think is commensurate to the scale of the crisis, which unfortunately is, a crisis that's been extended by the unwillingness of our national leadership to lead the national response to the pandemic. There was a lot more leadership even a few months ago when we had a coronavirus task force that was meeting every day at the White House, that was doing these press conferences. As frustrating as some of those press conferences were, at least it brought national attention to what the federal government was and wasn't doing. And right now, basically, the White House has given up. There's absolutely no effort, no activity. The leadership is all coming from states and from local governments right now. And that's why, as I've been saying all along, probably the most important piece of this bill that we still hope to be able to pass is getting direct assistance to our state, county, and local governments so that they can continue to do the work that they've been doing to keep us safe without having to cut back on basic services, schools, police, fire, public works, without having to raise our local, our state or property taxes. So that's still one of the sticking points in the negotiations. We've definitely made progress. We went from the White House saying, hell no, we're not going to do anything to, quote, bail out the blue states, even though the state and local aid is for every state, and many Republican-led states are asking for it as well for the same reasons. We've gone from that rejection, outright rejection, to now Secretary of the Treasury Mnuchin acknowledging that there will be, if we can reach a deal, there will be a decent amount of aid for our state and local governments. President is still tweeting, I think, about bailing out Democrat states, but that's not where they are in the negotiations. We've talked a lot about, another sticking point has been funding for schools. We all agree that we need more direct support for our schools and our kids. The sticking point has been that, at least originally, the White House was insisting on conditioning that school assistance on schools physically reopening, which we don't agree with. We think that should be a state and local decision based on local conditions. We don't want the federal government to be telling us in New Jersey exactly what our schools should be doing and when. I think we've made some progress on that. We're looking for assistance for child nutrition programs, obviously extending the unemployment benefits. There's agreement on that. Another round of stimulus checks, where I think we're on the same page as the White House. Senate Republican Senator McConnell is not for that, but I think we're closer to agreement with the White House. A lot of other things that are important to New Jersey, like continued assistance for mass transit programs. Obviously, we would benefit a great deal from that because we need Amtrak and New Jersey Transit to survive this crisis. Ridership is still uh, almost non-existent. And so our railroads are only going to survive um, and be intact for when we can use them again if we continue to get a little bit of relief, direct relief from the federal government. The airlines, you all have read, are in very difficult straits and are furloughing workers right now. And again, that's an industry that cannot, under current circumstances, be making a profit because people aren't traveling and shouldn't be traveling in the way that they were before. But we need national airlines to be there for us when we get to the recovery phase and we can travel again. Most of us in the House, we don't want to just do a bill bailing out the airlines and leaving the rest of the economy untouched, but we very much want to do it as part of this larger bill. And then finally, there's a lot of debate about provisions of the bill that will continue to fund a testing, contact tracing response to COVID-19 and other aspects of the public health response to the crisis, actually directly combating this pandemic. Democrats in the House have been insisting on language attached to the money that would compel the administration to actually have a national strategy for fighting this pandemic, including a national testing strategy. And that's been a point of significant contention as well, because the administration doesn't want to be compelled to do anything there. I'll tell you my view. I want a bill. I don't need it to be a perfect bill. I don't expect it to be a perfect bill. This is a negotiation. One party controls the House, the other party controls the Senate and the White House. So there's no world in which House Democrats, for example, are going to be able to get 100% of what they want, nor is there a world in which Senate Republicans or the White House could get everything that they want. We need to compromise. I have had a bottom line, which has included generous assistance for our state, county, and local governments. But my message to my leadership, to Speaker Pelosi, both privately and publicly, has been fight like hell to get the best deal you can, but then take a deal, because our folks do need help back home. We still have so many people who don't have their job backs. We still have so many small businesses that are just barely struggling to get by and could use another round of PPP assistance. We have those airline workers, as I mentioned. We desperately need for our hospitals and our public health system more support for fighting the pandemic. And frankly, no matter how much great language we get in this bill trying to force Donald Trump to be a good leader on the coronavirus, he's not going to be a good leader on the coronavirus, especially if he loses. I can't imagine him spending the last 2 months trying to help people. So my priority is just get the damn money in the hands of our state and local leaders all over the country who are actually trying to do their jobs. Let's get through the winter. And, we may have a new president next year. If so, we can do the things in February that we weren't able to do now in October. But I don't want to do nothing in October either. So that's my position on that. And I'm sure you guys will have questions and thoughts, and look forward to discussing. The other thing I wanted to just put on your radar today is a bill that I've been talking about for a while, which I introduced today in the House with my colleague, Representative Anna Eshoo from California. It's a bill that will hold our large social media companies like Facebook and Google accountable for the algorithms that they use to promote content to all of us, some of which I think is responsible for the rise of political extremism and even violent extremism in our country, for the promotion of hateful content, anti-Semitic content, content that helps to connect people with extremist organizations that end up committing acts of violence. We've talked a lot about that on many of these calls for those who've attended them frequently. I think a big part of why we are so divided as a country, so divided as a people, is that social media is now our main source of information and news. And social media subdivides us into all these categories. If you're liberal, you're going to get liberal news. If you're conservative, you're going to get conservative news. And particularly stuff that triggers our negative emotions, hate and fear. That's the stuff that their algorithms emphasize more than anything else and push at us, because they've learned that the more we're afraid and the more we feel hatred towards others, the more obsessively we remain glued to our screens, the more stuff we see online, the more ads we see, the more stuff we buy, which is what they want. And so these algorithms are designed basically to amplify content that triggers those emotions. And if you think about that and think about how many people are on Facebook and Instagram and see stuff on YouTube, you begin to understand the some of the reasons for our divisions. So this bill basically says, well, the companies right now have complete immunity from any kind of legal action for anything that we may post on their platforms. We're responsible for what we post. Facebook is not. But what this bill does is says if Facebook is algorithmically promoting those posts so that they go to some people and not others based on these algorithms, and you can connect that algorithmic promotion or recommendation to some real world offline harm, like an act of terrorism, for example, or a violent hate crime, then the companies are no longer immune and could face liability. And my hope is that in addition to just like taking down really bad content, which is a game of whack-a-mole, this legislation will force them to actually look under the engine and begin to redesign how their social networks work. Really ambitious goal. We will not pass it this year with a couple of months left. My hope is get it out there, start a discussion. We're going to get a good deal of press coverage on this. I think a lot of endorsements from organizations that are working to fight hatred and anti-Semitism and domestic terrorism. And then next year, hopefully turn it into legislation that can pass and begin to change things for the better. So those are two big things on my mind, but would love to open this up now and hear from all of you, whether on those two topics or any other issues or you want to put on the table or questions you want to ask. Thanks again. Back to you, DeAndre.
Thank you, Tom. Just a reminder, a few questions have come in, but at this moment, if you do have any questions that you would like to ask live, now is a good time to go ahead and start submitting those questions. Tom, your first pre-submitted question: is anything being done to financially support the Postal Service in these last few weeks of the election, before the election?
So just yesterday, Congressman Pasquarel and I tried to visit the Postal Service distribution center in Kearney, New Jersey, which handles a lot of our mail in northern New Jersey. We had the whole New Jersey delegation had asked for a chance to tour this facility and speak to the employees, just to reassure ourselves that they've got what they need and they can handle the level of mail that they're going to be getting around the election, despite some of these policy changes that the Postmaster General introduced. Good news is a lot of the policy changes that were holding up the mail have been suspended or reversed because of the pressure that we were able to put on Postmaster General DeJoy. But we wanted to see that for ourselves, so I could come back today and say, you know what, I think this is going to be fine. I'm not panicking, but I can't reassure you 100% because they refused to allow us to make that visit, citing some very strange and dubious interpretations of the Federal Hatch Act, which actually made no sense. But the bottom line is we were not able to go inside and speak to the employees that we wanted to. A lot of the local postmasters I speak to have been reassuring. They've told me, look, right now, everything that's coming in to their facilities, to their post offices in the morning is going out by the end of the day. It's getting delivered by the end of the day. We heard the same thing from the operations manager at Kearney who spoke to us. As far as resources, the post office absolutely does need money. They did get a loan from the Treasury Department, which could be why things are not going terribly right now. We are trying to do more, and one of the things that we have been demanding in this coronavirus legislation, which I didn't mention the first time through, is the money that the post office needs to stabilize its finances. That funding, by the way, was a request to Congress by the Postal Service Board of Governors, 100% of which was appointed by President Trump. So this should not be controversial. It only became controversial because of the usual tweets and things got politicized. But they definitely need it, and I hope that one way or another will be able to come through.
Thank you, Tom. Your next question: what happens if all popular votes are not counted in time for the convening of the Electoral College?
I want to start by saying I believe that all the votes will be counted in time for the convening of the Electoral College. I have a very hard time. I would have a very hard time understanding why any state would have trouble doing that unless there was a deliberate effort to slow things down. Now, that, of course, I'm sure many of you are thinking, is entirely possible in some states. And I would try to reassure you by noting that a number of the key states where, and let's face it, I think the suspicion is that President Trump supporters may have an interest in creating chaos around the counting of the polls. But in a number of these states, like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, you've got Democratic governors and secretaries of state, Michigan, the same, who will be actually managing the process of counting the votes. There may very well be legal challenges. So far, we have seen, I think, that the federal courts have rendered reasonable decisions within the mainstream when these kinds of challenges have been brought. There was, for example, a challenge brought by the Trump campaign against our vote-by-mail system here in New Jersey, which went absolutely nowhere. I thought it was ridiculous, but more importantly, the courts thought it was ridiculous, and it went nowhere. Most recently, the Supreme Court, this is interesting, split 4-4 on a decision in which they were considering whether to stay a lower federal court decision about some aspect of Pennsylvania's vote-by-mail system, allowing basically Pennsylvania to count mail-in ballots that come in like the day after the election, even if the postmark is not clear, on the theory that if it comes in the day after the election, then by definition, it was sent on election day or earlier. And so a lower court said, yeah, they can be counted, and the Supreme Court split 4-4, which means the lower court decision stands. Some people worry with the new justice that could change, but I have a hard time seeing Chief Justice Roberts, who cares about the reputation and legitimacy of the court, allowing such a sharp shift in basically a matter of 2 or 3 weeks on a matter as sensitive as the election, just because the president got a new person appointed to the court. So all that's to say that, lots of things are possible and we need to be very vigilant, but I don't want people to be panicking about this. There's a lot of thought that's been given to protecting the integrity of the system. We expect challenges. We expect it to come under attack. But I firmly believe that in the end, every vote is going to be counted, and whoever wins the most votes and the most electoral votes based on winning the most votes in those states will be sworn in as president on January 20th.
Thank you, Tom. We're going to start switching gears to our live questions. Again, we just ask that everyone stays muted throughout the call. It just cuts down on feedback and just allows everyone to hear the questions and the answers. We're going to switch over to live questions. Again, if you have a question at any point, please just use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, include your question, your name, and the town you're from, and we'll get you added to the list and get it, hopefully a chance for you to ask the Congressman live. When we do start, I will just call your name. From there, once you hear your name called, just go ahead and unmute yourself and begin asking your question. If you are having any difficulties unmuting yourself or if we're having any technical difficulties, I'll reach out to you in the chat feature. Also in the chat feature, I'll let you know when you're up next, or if there's any other things I need to let you know before we get to your live question. So please just pay attention to the chat feature for any comments I may have before your question. Without further ado, our first live question is from Philip. Philip, can you hear us? Philip? All right, I will switch gears to our next question as we get Philip worked out. Our next question comes from John. John, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, thank you. This is John Cavanaugh in Flanders. Thank you, Congressman, for your effort in this meeting again today. Well, two things. I'd like to just state that I did vote yesterday, and I did drop my ballot off at the secure box.
Good.
And while I was there, I noticed that the two representatives came by as well as a sheriff, and they picked up my ballot. So I'm monitoring my receipt on the online system. So I would encourage everybody, if you have any questions, to register with your county clerk and follow the online update of when they receive your ballot. Second, I'm involved with security and architecture and infrastructure. So I've been following the CARES Act, and the governor has just recently put up a new website that shows the current funding and spending of the CARES Act that you passed earlier this year. So there's still $4 billion of monies that have been paid by the federal government to the state and have yet to be appropriated.
Right.
Can you comment on that? I mean, does that impact your second act that you mentioned earlier of what you're trying to do?
So there are a couple of reasons for that, and I don't want to suggest that it's, that I'm not thrilled by that. But there are a couple of good reasons why it's not necessarily easy for the state to distribute that funding, and why it may be prudent not to distribute all of it at once. The reason why it's difficult is that the original CARES Act funding for the states was limited to compensating states for direct COVID-19 related expenses. So, if you're setting up a drive-through testing facility or you're buying PPE, that's obviously direct COVID-19 related, and that state money can pay for it. Recently, the state transferred millions of dollars in CARES Act funding to some of our smaller rural counties, including Morris and Warren, that didn't get a direct allocation themselves from the CARES Act for that purpose, mostly to kind of continue coronavirus testing services and other direct COVID-19 related stuff. But really the main difficulty that the state is having, and that a lot of our counties and localities are having, it's not paying for the direct COVID expenses. It's the fact that revenues have slowed down. because the economy has shut down. Sales tax revenues, obviously, are down. Business tax revenues. Any locality that is relying on hotels and conference centers and stuff other than property taxes has seen a decline in revenue. And the CARES Act did not allow you to spend any of that money to compensate, to make up for revenue lost due to the coronavirus crisis.
I get that, but like New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency,
Right.
I don't know exactly what that is, but 15 million was appropriated and 500,000 has been spent. Could that help people pay a mortgage? Is that what that agency is supposed to do?
It's a good question, and we'll follow up on that one in particular.
Okay.
But there were, and I'm actually not sure actually if the state can use the CARES Act allocation for that purpose, whether that's considered direct enough. But anyway, so that's one reason. I think the second reason, and you can debate whether this is right or wrong, but let's say you were in economic distress and somebody gave you $1,000 and they told you, John, I might give you another 1,000 next week. There's a chance I'll give you 10,000 in 3 or 4 weeks, but I can't tell you right now. You might get nothing other than this 1,000. You might get more, but you might get nothing more. You might be pretty conservative about how you spent that first 1,000, right? Until you had more certainty about how much help you were actually going to get. And so I think one of the factors here, and this puts it squarely back onto the shoulders of Congress and the president, is that the state of New Jersey and our local and county governments just don't know whether they're going to be getting any more relief from the federal government. I'm fighting for it, but I can't promise them 100% that it's going to happen because of all the resistance from McConnell and at least until recently from the president. So in a way, I can understand a decision to husband those resources a little bit until you know exactly how much you have to spend in the end, because you're going to make different choices about how to spend that money based on the answer to that question.
Okay, but like this category. I didn't make up the categories. Maybe you folks did. Maybe the state did. But health and others, $173 million appropriated, nothing spent. I would have to think people are sick or people need some health services.
Well, the state has spent a tremendous amount of money on the public health response to COVID-19. So I can't really comment on how it's being counted in that document.
Okay.
But certainly a lot of CARES Act money has been used to support testing, to support all of our drive-through testing facilities, particularly when we were reliant on those. A lot has gone to the hospitals. And then remember, most of the CARES Act money that has benefited our communities went directly to people and to businesses and to nonprofit institutions, including our hospitals. So there is this kind of myth out there that we didn't get our share of CARES Act money, which is complete BS. We got
Looks like we might have lost the congressman for a split second. Just give us a moment as hopefully he can reconnect really quickly. All right. Just like I said, it wouldn't be teleworking or working from home if you didn't have a few technical difficulties. So again, just give us just a few more moments as we get the congressman reconnected. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, sorry.
All right, we got you back, Tom. Yes.
Great. Sorry, remind me we also need to pass that rural broadband bill.
I will make sure we add that one to the list, Tom.
Good, but I think I pretty much summed up the answer. It's a totally legitimate question, and we will. I will ask my team to look at the housing item in particular, but I actually do think most of that makes sense when you look at the practical challenges that the governor and the state have faced, and the state of uncertainty that we have kept them in because of the resistance to additional state and local relief at the federal level, which hopefully we break through today.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John, for your question. Our next live question comes from Tatiana. Tatiana, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hi.
Hi. So my question is about the contact tracing language in the relief bill. Will there be any language about how that's done? Because I've heard that currently it's about tracing who comes in contact with that person that has already tested positive, like who they've come in contact with since they've tested positive. But that research shows it might actually be better to find out where that original person got the COVID from in order to find more positive cases and more easily keep people quarantined.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and the legislation would not micromanage it to that extent. I mean, it wouldn't be appropriate for Congress to mandate those kinds of details in a bill. Like, what we really want is for the administration listening to scientists, listening to Dr. Fauci and others like him, to empower the Centers for Disease Control to be able to coordinate a nationwide effort to do this. Because otherwise we're going state by state by state. And some states are doing a better job. Some states are doing a worse job. Some states don't seem to care at all and think that, everybody should just go out and party. And then there are people in the White House now who are actually promoting this concept of herd immunity, which I consider to be mass murder. The idea that we should just all get COVID and somehow separate younger and healthy people from those who would be vulnerable in a way that protects those vulnerable people, and they have no way of doing that. I find that so dark and distressing that these people, having utterly failed for the last few months to protect us in the way that most other people in advanced countries in the world have been better protected from COVID, after utterly failing, their strategy now is just to give up and say everybody should get COVID, and we build up immunity that way. That would be condemning hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Americans to death. So what we want them to do is to commit to a science-based national strategy, which we would expect to be developed by not members of Congress. We're not qualified to do that, but by the Centers for Disease Control. And by the way, as I said in my opening remarks, I want that, but if we can't get everything we want there, my recommendation to Speaker Pelosi is to still try to cut a deal, because if there's anyone on this call who is still dependent on those unemployment benefits because you lost your job, if there's a small business owner on this call who may need extra help over the winter, especially if you're a restaurant owner, we've got language in this bill that provides direct grants to restaurants, bars, entertainment venues to make up for the revenues they're losing due to the pandemic. If you're in any of those categories, I don't want to ask you to wait until February, just because we can't get President Trump to agree to be a good president for the next 3 months. I want to help people, and I want it to be sufficient. I don't want it to be paltry, but if we can get reasonable amount of help, I want to just get it done. So we'll see what happens. I may be very happy, I may be disappointed, but that's what I've been pushing for.
Thank you both. Before we go to our next live question, there are a few questions that have been submitted that are in regards to casework. That includes assistance with unemployment or PPP loans. I'm going to send around now the email to our casework email, excuse me. If you have any concerns in regards to unemployment or PPP loans or anything in regards to assistance with federal government agencies, please just send an email to that email I just sent around, and someone from our team will be in contact. Our next live question comes from George. George, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hi, George.
Hi, George.
Hi. You talked about this a little bit on the question before, but as you know, last week, Governor Murphy announced $100 million more of COVID business aid. Mm-hmm. Is there a website for learning more about this? And should organizations that already have PPP loans consider trying for additional aid?
I don't know about that. There must be something on a website, and we can try to find that for you.
Okay.
Maybe even during the course of this call. And if so, we will post it. And if not, we will just get it to you afterwards if you're willing to leave your contact info.
Sure.
And the answer to your second question is yes. This is for any small business that any small business that qualifies for this should absolutely apply if the need is there, and it doesn't matter whether you received a federal PPP loan or not. This is a state program. It is funded with CARES Act money, so it's something else we've been able to deliver in that way, but it's a state program run under state rules.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And George, we do have the website for that, so I'll definitely make sure you get that now. But you can also just leave us your email. We can also try to get that to your email as well, if you can't get it from the chat feature.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next live question comes from Mary. Mary, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Mary.
Hi. My question is, what can be done to ensure that the results from the 2020 decennial are accurate? I'm just worried that the repercussions of an inaccurate count could potentially follow us for the next 10 years, unless there is another count before 2030.
It's a really good question. One of the strange things that we saw happening this year was the administration's effort to stop the census count before most of the folks at the census were comfortable stopping. Obviously, it's been a harder year to count people because of the pandemic. Harder to go door to door and to reach people who may not have responded to the census in the mail or online. And so we felt, and most of the folks at the Census Bureau felt, that they needed more time. The administration cut it short. The Supreme Court just agreed that they had the right to do that, which disappointed me. So I think in New Jersey, from everything I'm hearing, we did get a pretty good count. Our district is kind of the world champion, best response rate in New Jersey, and one of the best in the country. So thank you to everybody who volunteered and participated in that. But I am concerned about parts of the country where we may not have gotten a full count. And it's important because federal resources depend on the census, and of course, ultimately, the drawing of congressional and state legislative district maps depends on the census. So, to directly answer your question, we'll have to see. We'll have to see whether this is satisfactory. We don't know that yet. would it be possible to redo the count, or perhaps perhaps do that in particularly underserved areas to enhance the initial count? My sense is probably yes, if we have leaders in Washington who have the political will to do that. The Constitution says that we have to do a census every 10 years. It doesn't say we can't do one more often. So I think there'll be a lot of options if it turns out that, I mean, if it's glaring that this is an incomplete count, and I'm very deeply committed to the idea behind the census, which is that we need to have information. We can be, we can make whatever policy decisions we want. We can debate them. We can disagree with each other, but we should be making those decisions based on accurate information about who's living in our country, how many people, and so if we don't have that, we're going to need to go and get it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Tom. Tom, for your next question, I will read it for the constituent. If ACA is struck down, what would you like to see in the new healthcare law?
So, if it is struck down, and I think that's not a certainty, but it is a very real possibility, then I would want to see all of the central features of the ACA preserved in a new law. And we would have to be able, we would have to read that Supreme Court decision very carefully, and find a way to work around the justices' arguments. And it's very hard to do that now because we haven't gotten that decision or those arguments yet. But the key elements of the law, obviously protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and we need to be very, very clear about what that means. It has to mean that if you have a pre-existing health condition, insurance companies cannot charge you more for your insurance because of that condition, and they have to provide coverage for that condition. They can't say, all right, we'll give you healthcare coverage, but not for, the congenital heart disease that your child was born with. Like, that's not included. No, every plan needs to cover the full range of essential health benefits, and everybody should be treated equally regardless of any pre-existing conditions. That's number one, most important. Of course, kids being able to stay on their families' plans till they're 25, Medicaid expansion, the protections against medical bankruptcy that we put in the ACA, that there's a cap on out-of-pocket expenses that any person or family might have to face. But those are the big ones, and opponents of the ACA have had 10 years to try to come up with an alternative. A lot of them say that they're for many of those things. They're just not for the law that guarantees them. And in 10 years, they haven't been able to propose another law that guarantees them. So I think, they're being very, very cynical and disingenuous. But if it's struck down, yeah, that's what we would have to do. We'd have to figure out a way to do all those things. The decision might, for example, rest on the whole question of the individual mandate. Remember, in the ACA, we also mandated that everybody have insurance, because part of the deal was if the insurance companies were going to cover all these things, they should also have more kind of young and healthy people paying into the system in order to support those additional expenses. I think we found it may be possible to support the ACA even without an individual mandate, although I do support the individual mandate, popular or not. We have it in New Jersey. We passed it in New Jersey, so it's still in place for us. So that may be something that, if the decision rests on that, we would need to find a way to work around. And then finally, this was not in the original ACA, but it was meant to be. I would very strongly support, if we have to legislate a new law, that we allow for a public option, that every American have the freedom to choose a public option like Medicare, to be able to buy into that on top of all the other choices they have, including private insurance choices. That's, in my view, the best way to get costs down for everyone, introduce more competition into the system. And I'm always for Americans having more freedom and more choice. So I'd be for that anyway. But if, the Supreme Court forces us to pass a major healthcare bill, I think that would be a great opportunity to include that provision.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Before we go to our next live question, if anyone has a question at any point throughout the call, again, please just submit it through the chat feature. This will be our last call for questions. Reggie, you're up next. Reggie, can you hear us? See.
This is Reggie from Phillipsburg, Warren County. I did vote last week. I voted for all Democrats, but that's not my question. I have two questions that are sort of related. One is there any new accurate information on the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan? I think Trump said before Christmas. So that's question number one. And the second question, I don't trust Trump. I think we're familiar with the term wag the dog. There was a movie called Wag the Dog where a president or some political leader tries to divert attention from one thing by starting a war. So I think I should be legitimately concerned, and all Americans should be concerned, that Trump is capable of starting something crazy like a war before this election in order to get people to rally around him.
Yeah. I stay up at night worrying about a lot of things, and there's nothing that, if you're in public office, there's nothing that you should worry more about than the potential that our men and women in uniform might be in harm's way, because we have no higher obligation than protecting them and protecting all of us. So in general, yes, but specifically, Reggie, first of all, I don't think that lots of Americans would be rallying around the president if he just out of the blue started a war somewhere right now. In fact, I think most Americans, including a lot of people who support President Trump, would be at best confused and quite possibly angry about that. And I think the president understands that. I think he understands that it probably wouldn't help him. There was certainly a risk of an outright conflict with Iran earlier this year, and many in Congress on both sides of the aisle spoke out about it, and I think made clear that the president would not have the bipartisan support that he would normally count on if he provoked a war unnecessarily. Obviously, if there was an attack on our troops, we would all rally around defending them. But provoking an offensive war would not have gotten much support, and we made that clear, and it didn't happen as a result. So always be vigilant, but it's not something that I really see right around the horizon. And on Afghanistan, we're currently, I don't have an exact number. I don't think anyone in Congress has an exact number, but I think we're around 5,000 right now, which is close to the minimum necessary to protect our embassy and to maintain our Air Force base there, which, as we speak, is basically helping the Afghan army fend off a really vicious attack by the Taliban on the city of Kandahar. So that's where we are right now. The president tweeted out troops home by Christmas, and then everybody else in the administration said, oh, he's just joking. Whatever you may think about whether we should be in Afghanistan or not, I actually believe we should be, and you may disagree with that. But whatever we think about that very difficult policy decision, what none of us should stand for is an administration that on these matters of war and peace, matters that affect the safety of American troops, is putting out 3 different messages a day that contradict each other, with the president tweeting and then his military leaders saying, no, ignore the tweet. I mean, having served in 2 administrations, it's still, I can't get used to that. You're supposed to speak with absolute clarity and consistency about how we are using our military around the world, because we have adversaries. They see that, right? And they make judgments based on what we say that could make the difference between life and death for a lot of people. So, it's confusing because they have been sending out confusing messages, and we've been trying to figure out what the actual answer to that is.
There you go.
Thanks, Reggie.
Thanks, Reggie. Thank you, Tom. Our next live question comes from Gina Marie. Gina Marie, can you hear us?
Okay, yes, good morning. Thank you for having this again. I always grateful that you're patient and kind with me. For those of you listen that not awares, I be disabled, so I dismissed a lot and made fun of. And Mr. Tom in his office all be very polite and good with me. So I value that. My question be, I got sick with the end of March, and I be worked the part-time, which considered like essential worker now, right? But I stopped be work about mid-March. I got sick. Now they tell me my lung, I have chronic lung. They say I negatives for tests, so I okay, but I live oxygen now. I still cough. I still sick. So I'm very concerned with how you're going to mandate the mask wear. And I understand the argument for, the freedom and all this stuff, and whatever side of the spectrum you want to get your wonky on with the mask wear, but it's essential since over 200,000 of us pass away. It's very hurtful that we are one of the most progressive countries in the world, and we can't get our poop together with this. I'm at a loss for words. I'm worried about if the Republicans still stay in office, whether he wins again or not, if they still have the power, how are we gonna be able to stay safe together and grow as a country? Because like you mentioned before about the package for the stimulus, it's not going to matter how many packages you put out if we still have to keep delay open and we still get sick. And we have more states closed with restrictions and the what is it, 2 weeks quarantine? I shut up now. I let you respond. But I'm very worried, and I know I don't understand how I feel I could be safe when I can't walk my own neighborhood without running into people that not respect my space to wear a mask. Like, I have an oxygen machine and a walker and a mask. Like back up, especially if you can't wear one. What's going on?
Well, Gina Marie, you're not at a loss for words, because your words are very, very clear and absolutely right. Wearing a mask is about respecting other people. This is not about freedom. I love freedom. I believe Americans should be free to think whatever they want and live the lives that they want, but none of us have the freedom to hurt other people. That's not freedom. That's irresponsibility. There's nothing strong about not wearing a mask. It's cowardly. Because it what it communicates is that the person is only interested in themselves and not interested in helping or protecting others. So that's why I very much support mask mandates where they are appropriate, and why I think we've done a better job in New Jersey than many other states where our leaders have basically encouraged people not to wear masks, where governors have encouraged people to defy mask orders that come down from their local governments. And I get very, very angry when we see leaders who are not setting a good example themselves. The easiest thing you can do if you are a president, if you're a senator or a congressman or a governor, the easiest thing you can do is to set a good example in your own behavior. A lot of other things are hard and complicated, but that's easy. And when leaders set a bad example, other people follow them, and then you end up with the experience that you're having, somebody not respecting you and your legitimate right to be healthy and protected, even as they're passing you on the street in your neighborhood. So, you know, I know that that's tough, but please know that most people in your community, most people in New Jersey, care about you and respect you and agree with you that we need to be behaving responsibly. And most of our leaders in New Jersey, I think, are setting a good example and encouraging others to do so as well. So hang in there. And you know you have a community of people here who support you.
Thank you, Gina Marie. Thank you, Tom. Our next live question comes from Mary. Mary, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Do you favor changing the number of justices on the Supreme Court?
It's not something that I would like to see happen. Unfortunately, you know, it already started happening in 2016 when Senator McConnell effectively changed the number of justices on the Supreme Court from 9 to 8. And at that point, there were many senators in his caucus who were saying that if Secretary Clinton had won the presidency that year, they would just keep it at 8. They would not allow her to name a justice for her 4-year term. So look, I think this is a controversial issue. What I hope that everybody would agree on is that whatever the rules are, they should apply equally to everybody. So either we respect the tradition, the unwritten rule that every president should get to nominate qualified judges to the Supreme Court for all 4 years that they're in, and that the Senate should take up those nominations and confirm the person if they're qualified, and that we shouldn't try to adjust the size of the Supreme Court to benefit either Democrats or Republicans. And that would be my preference. Or we agree that the rule is that everybody gets to do whatever the law allows, whatever they have the power to do to benefit the interests of their side. That would not be my preference. But if that's what one side does, that's what the other side's going to do too. So pick one, but it can't be one side respects the traditions and the other side just uses their power to get the most number of judges on the Supreme Court that agree with them. So my hope is that we don't have to go there. It's still my hope that the Senate will wait until the election before deciding whether to confirm Judge Coney Barrett. I think that's what most Americans would like to see. But, I think where we need to agree, even if we don't agree on this nomination or whether we're Democrats or Republicans and we disagree on a lot of things, where I hope we would agree is that both sides should play by the same rules. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Tom. Tom, our final question, I'll let you right after this question lead into closing remarks. Are you supportive of the New Jersey COVID Alert phone app? And is it being done? What is being done to promote its use?
Well, I'm not actually sure what that is, which probably means that not enough is being done to promote its use. Can you tell me more about it? Oh, there we go. Well, I see it, but tell me more.
Let me see if I can get the constituent that asked the question to jump on. But if someone else on the phone or on the call does know more about it, please feel free to chime in.
I see somebody holding it up there. So is that just kind of the data platform that shows the daily data?
It's basically it kind of gives like a count of cases by day,
Right.
deaths by day. It's got not sure if you can see it well enough, but it's got that sort of information.
Got it.
And then
So yeah, I've been logging on just to their website to get that information. So obviously, I think, and I was pressing the governor and his team on this very early on back in March, that transparency and information is everything in a pandemic. When people are afraid of something, the more factual information you can get to them, the better, even if it's sometimes bad news. People need to know the facts, and they need to know the level of risk that's out there and what they can do to protect themselves. So yeah, I mean, I think it's great to have an app, and everybody should be using it. And I guess I should set a good example and download it myself now, so that I can also comment on how good it is the next time I'm asked this question. And we are experiencing, speaking of facing honest truths, we are experiencing the third spike. And it is very, very distressing, and it's in multiple states. As has been the case for many months, New Jersey is still doing better than most states in this country. But there's no question that we are experiencing a spike ourselves, which apparently is mostly based on events in private homes indoors. And we have to be vigilant about this. The winter is coming. As we would say in the Game of Thrones, and and that's not good news for from the point of view of controlling this pandemic. The good news is we know so much more about it than we did back in March and April. We know how to reduce and prevent transmission. We know that wearing masks, a very simple precaution, really, really does work. Whatever you may think of Governor Christie, listen to him. Like he said, I was wearing a mask for months and nothing happened. And I didn't wear a mask for 4 days, go into all that stuff at the White House, and I got COVID. Like, this is real. And, we've just all got to do our part to crush this thing. And in the meantime, I hope that we can get more aid from the federal government to help us deal with the economic consequences. Alrighty.
Thank you, Tom. Now go ahead and turn it back over to you for closing remarks, then Tom too.
Good. Thank you, DeAndre. Thanks to everybody for joining and for the really good questions. As always, I enjoy these conversations. I get so much out of them. First and foremost, my priorities, and I hope to see you all again for the next one. Please be sure to vote if you haven't already. I'm guessing almost everyone on this call has already gone out to vote, but make sure you do. The earlier, the better. Encourage your friends to do it, whether they're voting for me or against me. Get people to vote. That's the best thing we can do for our country right now. So with that, see you all later. Hope you get a chance to get outside on this beautiful day. Stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.